Okay, so we're going to just, no, let's introduce it first. I was going to just dive in. I really want to get into the scriptures tonight, but let me give a bit of a preface. So we live in a very postmodern world, right? Postmodern. Now, postmodern basically means that the individual is able to self-determine what is true. In other words, each of you is the final authority on your own life. And this got me to ask the question, if I ask a postmodern person, i.e. everyone in the room, the question of who is Jesus, I'm probably going to get a very varied response. Over the years as I've been pastoring, I've met a lot of people that have told me a lot of things about Jesus. Now, what the church does or has done often in response to this kind of definition of Jesus, I met somebody once that believed that, Jesus was the same as every other God. And he's like, I can believe that because I'm a good postmodern person and I can just decide to do that. I was like, that's really interesting. I'm pretty sure no other gods worked and lived and died in Jerusalem in the first century. That's pretty unique, but okay. So in this world where we can self-determine who Jesus is, the church has often come at it by listing a set of truths about who Jesus is. We go, well, Jesus was a first century man. He lived in and around Nazareth, Jerusalem, Bethlehem kind of area, which is a pretty big area if you know your geography. And in the first century, he died under a guy named Pontius Pilate. He was crucified. Maybe you believe he rose from the dead. The church affirms that he rose from the dead, and that when we put our faith in him, we have life. Now, what we do is we declare these things as true, right? I just basically listed like the basic tenets of Christianity. But the question I have for you tonight isn't can you list the basic tenets of Christianity in response to the question of who is Jesus. What I want to ask you tonight is when you look at how you relate to Jesus, who is Jesus? The question of who is Jesus can't just be a list of explanations about what Jesus did at one point 2,000 years ago. I believe that when we have an encounter with Jesus, it moves from just being information to being transformation. And I didn't come to church tonight so that I could get some information about Jesus. I hope you didn't come to church tonight so that you could walk out with 2 Greek definitions and some information about Jesus. By the way, that you're going to get 2 Greek definitions tonight. I'm really excited about it. I hope you didn't come expectant for information. I hope you came expectant for transformation. And then when we explore this question of who is Jesus, you are ready and willing and anticipating a transformation in your heart and in your soul this evening. Because the answer to the question, who is Jesus, can't be information for us as believers. It can't stop at some information. We've got to see that become transformation in us. I feel like I want to preach a sermon about how that's a work of the Holy Spirit, but we'll do that another time. All right. Mark chapter 10, verse 36. If you're there, say, I'm there. I'm there. That was like very scattered. I think it's going to be up on the screens any second now. There it is. That was awesome. If you're there, say, I'm there. That's everyone in the room. All right. Here we go. So before I get into this, just really quick, there's 2 stories. I'm slamming them together because I think Mark, our author, in this case, put them together for a reason. I'm actually preaching about Bartimaeus tonight, but we're going to start off by talking about the disciples. Whenever the disciples enter the scene, you can guarantee that they did it wrong. And they did it wrong in this case. Okay, so let's check it out. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came over and spoke to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do us a favor. What is your request, he asked. This is Jesus asking. They replied, when you sit on your glorious throne, we want to sit in the places of honor next to you, one on your right and the other on your left. But Jesus said to them, you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink from the bitter cup of suffering that I am about to drink? Are you able to be baptized with the baptism of suffering I must be baptized with? Oh, yes, they replied, we are able. Then Jesus told them, indeed, you will drink from my bitter cup and be baptized with my baptism of suffering. But I have no right to say who will sit on my right or on my left. God has prepared those places for the ones he has chosen. When the 10 disciples heard that James and John, what James and John had asked, they were indignant. So Jesus called them together and said, "You know the rulers of this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. But among you it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first among you must be the slave of everyone else. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others, and to give his life as a ransom for many." And now we meet Bartimaeus. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus!" It's very exciting. "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him. But he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My rabbi," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." Instantly the man could see and followed Jesus down the road. You know that prayer, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me," is actually a prayer that has been adopted into, in this case, the Eastern Orthodox Church. And they've turned it into a prayer where the words go like this: "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy on me, a sinner." "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of David, have mercy on me, a sinner." I did a prayer exercise once where I would repeat that prayer over and over and over again, kind of like a rhythm. And it's amazing as I did so, my perception and my attitude of myself and of Jesus began to shift. See, this prayer that Bartimaeus prays is a prayer that has shaped the church for millennia. "Son of David, have mercy on me." And so what is it about this prayer that is so special? Why is it that Mark has decided to include this story in his short account of Jesus' life? Words are precious. Why this prayer? What's significant about it? You see, Bartimaeus was a blind man, and he was a beggar. And he comes to Jesus unable to see who Jesus is. And he says to Jesus, or he shouts at Jesus, "Son of David, have mercy on me. Son of David, have mercy on me." And over and over and over again, he shouts this. When the people try to quiet him, and in trying to quiet him, he only shouts it louder and louder and louder. And finally, he gets Jesus' attention. And Jesus brings him in. And he walks out a man able to see. What was it about that prayer that opened up the opportunity to see Jesus? To encounter Jesus? You see, the word "Son of David" is actually a very unique prayer. When you read through Mark's gospel, it's not found. It's unique to Bartimaeus. It's not this prayer, this title that's used often for Jesus. It's a new title that we see, and it's a title that captures within it all of the messianic promises found in the Jewish scriptures. You see, the Jewish people believed that the hope of their people, the hope of their nation, was going to come through a Savior called the Messiah from the line of a king named David. Now, David lived about 1,000 years earlier. And they believed that out of this line would come redemption. That actually hope incarnate would be in this person called the Messiah. So when Bartimaeus cries out, "Son of David," he's not just declaring a title to Jesus. He's not just saying, "Hey, Jesus. Hey, over here, Jesus. Come on. Yeshua, come on. What's up, dude? I want your attention." No. he's actually declaring, Jesus, you are the hope of the world. The man who cannot see has seen who Jesus really is. See, the question I want to explore tonight is, who is Jesus? And Bartimaeus in this moment, as he cries out to Jesus, has caught a glimpse, just a glimpse of who Jesus is in his recognition of his words, Son of David. Now, there's something interesting. This is a bit of a tangent, but it was too cool to not mention. Bartimaeus is one of the only people that is named that Jesus heals in the Gospels. Jesus heals a lot of people, but Bartimaeus is one of the only people whose name we actually have. Now, Bartimaeus is a fascinating name. It's actually a mashup of an Aramaic name and a Greek name. Bar means son of, and it's Aramaic. And Timaeus is like a Greek word. This isn't the Greek definitions. We're going to get to that later. Timaeus is like a Greek name. And so we have this name, Bartimaeus. And then since this probably was kind of confusing because it's like cross language, Mark clarifies that he means son of Timaeus. And I thought of two possible reasons why this is. This is kind of my own thinking. The first is that I think he's trying to draw attention between the fact that the blind beggar who cannot see, who is the son of Timaeus, has correctly identified that Jesus is the son of David, the hope of the world. There's an interesting parallel there. The second interesting parallel, which is scholars debate on this, and there isn't a great deal of consensus, but Plato, the Greek philosopher, wrote a work called Timaeus. And in that work, he talks about how vision is the pathway to knowledge. That vision is the pathway to knowledge. And so here we have a man who has a mashup of an Aramaic and a Greek name. Is Mark trying to make kind of an ironic kind of allusion to Plato's work, Timaeus? Maybe. Can't be sure. But here's what we can be sure of. We can be sure that Mark is trying to show us that Bartimaeus has correctly identified who Jesus is. Bartimaeus' declaration, you are the son of David, is no minor declaration. This means that despite the fact that Bartimaeus is blind, that he walks in a weak, broken, begging man, he has been able to see who Jesus really is. You see, Bartimaeus realizes that Jesus is not just another teacher among the list of teachers. He's not just a moral guide. He's not just this guy contributing into the world. No, he is actually hope incarnate itself. He is the man that God is going to bring redemption to the world through. You see, often what we do in our faith is we look at our weaknesses. Now imagine Bartimaeus looks at himself and says, I can't see, I have no hope. And he allows the fact that he cannot see to influence what he sees spiritually in Jesus. You see, what we do is we allow our spiritual weaknesses to influence, or even our physical weaknesses to influence how we perceive the character and the goodness of God. And you see, tonight, your inability, your weakness does not define God's ability. You see, Jesus remained the Messiah, and Bartimaeus was able to see that even though he had an inability to see. Mark is trying to remind us, hey guys, open your eyes to see who Jesus is. You see, Bartimaeus, despite of his condition, he could see very clearly. Oftentimes what we do is we allow our brokenness, our hurt, our weaknesses to frame our understanding of God. But this is not what Bartimaeus does. He doesn't allow his understanding of God to be framed entirely by the fact that he's blind. Instead, he allows the fact that he's blind to be framed by his understanding of who Jesus is. What if we as a church stopped defining God's ability by our inability, but started defining our inability by God's ability? What if we started to see and say, God, maybe in my brokenness you can accomplish great things. But I think sometimes what happens is we end up so frustrated. Bartimaeus could have ended up this frustrated, angry man who was embittered that he was blind and whose heart became hard to the things of God. For many of us, what we do is we go through church life and we get hurt along the way. Maybe the church has hurt you. Maybe even in this room, I've hurt you tonight. What if when we allow that hurt, those weaknesses, those brokennesses, those situations to frame our understanding of God, we're getting it backwards. What we need to do is start to learn to see the brokenness in ourselves and the brokenness in the world through a lens of who Jesus is. You see, Bartimaeus sees his inability to see through the fact that standing in front of him, he recognizes is this man named Jesus. Now, you see, it's very interesting to me that Bartimaeus has this revelation of who Jesus is. He has this revelation that causes him to come to Jesus and say, Son of David. Son of David. And as he comes to him, this understanding of who Jesus is shapes the posture that he comes to Jesus, and it shapes his request of Jesus. Now, as I said, Mark has very intentionally set this story up. We've got the story of the disciples making a request to Jesus. And then we have Bartimaeus making a request to Jesus. And sometimes what we do is we just go, well, this is just coincidence. You just got set up this way. But the more I study Scripture, the more I see the genius of the way that God inspired its writing, to see it sewn together. You see, the disciples come to Jesus. James and John, they rock up. They're Jesus' friends, and they've been mustering up the strength. They're ready to ask a bold request. They're all excited to come to Jesus. They've been working hard. They've been earning those brownie points. They've been racking it up. And they're going to come to Jesus with this big, bold request. They come to Jesus and they say, we want you to do us a favor. And Jesus says, all right, what is it? What is your request? They say, okay, here it is, Jesus. Here's our big, bold request. We want to sit in the places of honor next to you. I'll take the right. James can take the left. It's going to be a party. We're going to rule with you. It's going to be great. The best you've ever seen. So the request of Jesus is for this place of honor. Bartimaeus, on the other hand, comes to Jesus and says, I just want to see. Now, what's very interesting is they both address Jesus as teacher. And in addressing Jesus as teacher, or something to that effect, the word the word Bartimaeus uses is my rabbi. Actually, those two words come from two different Greek words. The disciples, when they come to Jesus, they say teacher. But the word they use for teacher is the Greek word didaskalos. Everybody say didaskalos. There we go. It's good Greek. I took Greek one summer. I'm very grateful for it. I was not grateful for it at the time. Didaskalos. So didaskalos is like a generic Greek word that means teacher, professor, boss, like kind of, someone that's teaching you. And the thing with the didaskalos is that there was lots of didaskaloses out there. There was lots of teachers out there. There was lots of professors. There was lots of people communicating information. And so the title they assign to Jesus before they come with this presumably bold request is basically like, hey, professor, hey, teacher, we've got a question. We've got a request. But this is not the word that Bartimaeus uses. The word that Bartimaeus uses is only used twice in the New Testament to address Jesus. We translate it as rabbi. Now, Jesus is called rabbi many times, but not with this word, not with this Greek word. The Greek word that they use here is the Greek word rabboni. Everybody say rabboni. Now, the thing with rabboni is that it's only used twice. It's used by Mary Magdalene in John chapter 20. And then it's used by Bartimaeus in addressing Jesus. Now, when you go and study Jewish literature from the first century, what you will find is that Rabboni is a title that is reserved usually for describing God. You see, Bartimaeus comes to Jesus and he recognizes that in here, he is not just having another teacher. It's not just another good man. It is his Rabboni, his Lord, his King, his on high. And so when you come to Jesus, is Jesus just another didaskalos? Is when you read about him, is he just other information that gives you some moral principles? Or is Jesus tonight your Rabboni? Is he the one that you are following, that you have given authority over your life to? You see, the disciples grounded their request in just approaching Jesus as just another option, another one that they were following that was doing the right thing at the time, their teacher. But Bartimaeus understood that Jesus was not just an option among many options. No. He was the option. It was his Rabboni. Is Jesus just your teacher? Or is he your king tonight? Who is Jesus? Now, Bartimaeus goes on. He begins to shout, actually. He says, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Everybody say mercy. Mercy. Have mercy on me. You see, it's not just enough to acknowledge who Jesus is. It's not just enough to go, okay, Jesus, you're, and then we list the creedal confessions of who Jesus is. That's not enough. And Bartimaeus understands this. As he comes to Jesus, he doesn't just stop at Jesus, son of David, I have a question. He says, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Now here's the thing about mercy. When we request mercy from someone, we are fundamentally putting that person in a position of authority and power over us. You see, the reason you need mercy from someone is because they can give you something that only they can give you, but it's their choice. Mercy cannot be forced. Mercy cannot be demanded. Mercy can only be granted. And you see, Bartimaeus comes to Jesus and he says, have mercy on me. This request for mercy is a recognition of Jesus' supremacy over his life. Mercy implies authority. It implies that we are then submitted to the person exercising that mercy. You see, Bartimaeus is keenly aware of the fact that he is blind, that there's nothing that he can do that can restore sight to him. So he comes to Jesus and he says, have mercy on me, because he recognizes that there's nothing in him that can heal him. He allows Jesus to assume a place of supremacy over him. You see, before Bartimaeus asked Jesus to do something for him, he first recognizes who Jesus is, and then he allows Jesus to assume his rightful place over his life. It's not enough to just say who Jesus is. If we are not willing to place him as the authority in our lives, then we are missing the picture. Now, you see, this is a very challenging idea. There are two words that I've used that we really don't like when we talk about other people. The first word that I use is the word power. And the second word that I used was the word authority. If you're like, I'm not sure where Robin's getting this, we don't like asking for mercy, is fundamentally what it comes down to. Now, similarly, we also don't like being in a position where we're powerless. And we don't like being in a position where we're submitted. Bartimaeus steps into both when he requests mercy. Now, there are two reasons that I think we don't like these words. I'm calling the first reason the circumstantial reason, and I'm calling the second reason the innate reason. I made these up. They're not like, you're not going to find them in a theology textbook. Just as a way of illustration. So the circumstantial reason that I want to give you tonight for why we don't like this problem of power and have people having power over us, much less Jesus having power over us, is actually found straight up in Mark 10:42. A couple verses above. Jesus says this. He says, you know that the rulers of this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those under them. You see, when we look at the concept of people that have power and authority over others, what we see is oppression, subjugation, and brokenness. When you open up the news, or I don't think you open up the news anymore, when you navigate to the news, we're in the 21st century, when you navigate to the news, we see story after story after story of people that have used their positions of power for abuse. And what we conclude out of this is that power and authority is always wrong, that it's always broken, that it is an inherently bad thing. And we conclude out of that Jesus' authority and his power must be similarly bad and evil and broken. You see, what we do is we read the behavior of those in power in our world. We read that behavior onto Jesus. And we go, Jesus, I don't want to give you power and authority because that means oppression and abuse. However, the authority of Jesus is nothing like the authority of this world. Jesus goes on, he says, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. You see, there's a vast ocean of difference between the kind of power that Jesus exercises and the kind of power that the world exercises. The kind of power that Jesus exercises is about serving, is about grace, and is about seeing people restored to life. The kind of power that the world exercises is about dominion and control and subjugation. Let us see Jesus' authority in our lives through the lens of Jesus' authority. Let us not see Jesus' authority in our lives through the lens of the worldly authority. So that's the circumstantial, meaning that we allow our understanding of Jesus' authority in our lives to be defined by what we see in the world around us. But then there's the innate issue. You see, as the request of the disciples shows, what we want in this world is we want to be the ultimate authorities in our own lives. We want power and control. We want to have agency over our own identity. And it is this craving for power that so defines us. We don't want to release control to Jesus. We want to contain it for ourselves. This is why the disciples come to Jesus and go, would you just put us on the left and on the right? Because we would like to rule. We would like authority. You see, Bartimaeus understands that when he says to Jesus, have mercy on me, he is allowing Jesus to assume a place of authority in his lives, recognizing that Jesus' way of life is better than his way of life. Allowing Jesus to have authority means allowing him to have it in every area of our lives. Allowing his Spirit to define our moral convictions, our relationships, our finances, our future, our ideas. This is not the way the postmodern world thinks, though. As good postmoderns, we think that we're the final authority over our own lives. I was reading an article this week by an apologist named John McCrae. He said this, in our culture, the individual is taken to be their own authority. How they feel and their experiences are what they consider to be authoritative. The cultural doctrine is now personal freedom, self-expression, and subjective relativism. But this is not what Bartimaeus does. Bartimaeus doesn't say, well, Jesus, you're just going to be what I want you to be. No. He comes to Jesus and he says, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. He submits himself to Jesus. How many of us are willing to actually do that tonight? You see, giving Jesus a place of authority means acknowledging that our finitude does not even compare to his infinite greatness. That how small we are does not compare to the greatness of the Creator, God. You see, Bartimaeus' plea for mercy was not a pitiful plea for mercy. It wasn't oh, woe is me, have mercy on me. No, it was a recognition of the supremacy and the authority and the greatness of the one whom he was standing in front of. You see, giving Jesus a place of proper authority is grounded in a proper understanding of our desperate need for him. So let me ask you this question. You're like, I don't know how to process this. I don't know if Jesus has good authority in my life. Let me ask you a question that maybe you're not going to like. I didn't like it. How do you relate to human authorities in this world? When somebody has authority over you, how do you feel about it? Does it make you tense and anxious and rebellious and angry? If you go and read 1 Peter, he has something to say about submission to authority and what that says about our submission to Jesus' authority. Maybe that's some homework for you. Go and read 1 Peter. Now, you see, what you believe and how you relate to human authority is probably a pretty good indicator of what you think and how you relate to godly authority. Ow. That hurts. I don't like that. I'm going to go write about that when I get home. Go home and journal about that. Read 1 Peter. So Bartimaeus comes to Jesus with this recognition. He starts off by recognizing who Jesus is. And then he continues to not just recognize who Jesus is, but give him a place of authority over his life. So if the first kind of interesting contrast then is first how the disciples versus Bartimaeus saw Jesus, and secondly how they related to Jesus. The third thing is what they asked of Jesus. You see, the disciples come to Jesus with this bold request. We want to sit on your left. We want to sit on your right. We want to be bold. We want to rule with you, Jesus. This is our big request. You see, the biggest thing that the disciples could envision was to sit in a position of power with Jesus. Not in an eternal kingdom, but in an earthly kingdom. You see, the disciples were unable to see the kingdom of Jesus. All they could see was their selfish ambition in their own ideas of Jesus' kingdom. And so they vied for position. They're going, I want a little bit on the left. I want to be on the right. I want to rule with you, Jesus. And Jesus corrects him and says, no, my kingdom is not like that. But Bartimaeus' request is completely different. His request is, I want to see. It might seem that the disciples had the bold request, the request that required guts. I mean, it can't be a bold request for a blind man to ask to see. Aren't all blind men asking to see? But you see, what Bartimaeus understood was that Jesus' kingdom was a kingdom of restoration of people. That as he submits to Jesus, it opens up the potential for restoration. You see, asking Jesus to heal him is an impossible request, and yet he asks it anyway. Bartimaeus was simply asking to be restored, asking to be made whole, asking to be made right. You see, Jesus' kingdom is a kingdom where the broken are made whole, where the brokenhearted are healed, where the sick are healed, where the grieving are blessed. Jesus' kingdom is not a kingdom of authority and power. It is a kingdom where brokenness and humility and grief, where Jesus takes those and he makes us whole. It's not a kingdom where we hold position and power. It's a kingdom where we desperately seek to see people restored to life. And maybe you walked into this place tonight and you go, I'm not whole. Maybe you walked in and you're going, I'm feeling blind and directionless in life. Maybe you walked in and you're going, I've been stuck in these patterns of addiction or behavior or thought. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Can we come to Jesus tonight with that prayer? Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. You see, Jesus' longing is to make us whole. Are we willing to come to him in our brokenness tonight? Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus responds. He says in verse 52, go, for your faith has healed you. Go, for your faith has healed you. Bartimaeus had the faith to see who Jesus really was, to acknowledge his position in his life. He had faith to allow Jesus to assume that position of authority in his life. Have mercy on me. And then he had the faith to see Jesus' kingdom as a kingdom of restoration, not a kingdom of oppression. And out of this faith, Jesus restores sight to him and life to him. But what's amazing is what happens next. It says, instantly the man could see. And he followed Jesus down the road. And he followed Jesus down the road. As Jesus restores sight to this man, he doesn't just restore sight, he restores purpose. He takes a man that could spiritually see but not physically see. He gives him physical sight, but a spiritual purpose. You see, his faith didn't just allow him to physically see. It allowed him to be commissioned into a life of following Jesus. I'm just going to invite you guys to bow your heads as we wrap tonight. If you're in this place tonight and you are longing to see Jesus, and you're going, I've been making Jesus just an option, just a kind of a duty. But tonight you want to say, I want to see the real Jesus. I want to encounter the real Jesus. I want to acknowledge the real Jesus. I don't want Jesus to just be an idea on the shelf. I want Jesus to be the central component of my life. If that's you, why don't you put up your hand tonight? Yeah, all over. Yeah, once it's up, you can put it down. The second question I have tonight is a challenging question. Are you willing to submit to Jesus tonight? Some of you have walked into this place and you're going, I don't know if I can do that. You walked and going, there's pieces of my life that I have not yielded to Jesus. But tonight you want to say that prayer, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. I acknowledge your position of authority in my life. If that's you, why don't you raise your hand? Yeah, all over. See, I'm raising my hand with you guys. Once it's up, you can put it down. Lastly, tonight, if you've walked in this place and you're going, I feel like I'm broken and I want to be made whole. I feel like I've been walking without sight and I want to learn to see. I feel like I've been carrying this baggage or this addiction, but Jesus, would you restore me? If that's you, why don't you raise your hand? Yeah, all over. Jesus, I pray for those that have responded tonight. Jesus, I pray that we would see you. Not the idea of you, not the abstract reality of you, but that we would actually see you for who you really are. And that we would allow that sight, God, that vision of who you are, to establish you as King over our lives. That we would give you authority in this place over our lives, over our relationships, over our decisions. Father, I pray for those that have walked in broken and wounded and grieving tonight. Jesus, I pray that there would be restoration in this place even right now. That you would set those that are struggling with addiction free. That you would set those that have walked in discouraged, God, that you would speak encouragement and life. Jesus, we praise you that you are a God that desperately loves to see us restored to full life. So I pray that those of us who are able to submit to you tonight, God, that you would restore life and goodness. And lastly, guys, before I close, if you're in this place tonight and you've never given your life to Jesus, you've never said, yes, I want to follow Jesus. And tonight, you know, you've been holding him at a distance. Maybe you've been exploring this Jesus thing for a while. But tonight you want to make a decision to say, I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm actually going to give my life to Jesus and allow him to dictate my future, my life. If that's you, why don't you raise your hand? Yeah, I see that in the back corner. I see that on the left. Is anyone else here tonight? Once your hand's up, you can put it down. Is anyone else tonight that says, I want to follow Jesus? Yeah. I'm just going to pray with you guys before I let you go. You guys can pray with me. Jesus, I acknowledge that you are good. And I ask you to forgive me for trying to be my own king. Forgive me, Lord, where I have sinned, where I have pursued my way instead of your way. Jesus, I give you authority over my life. I follow you. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for restoring me to life. Amen. Can we give it up for those that have said yes to Jesus tonight? I mean, that is just